Hi there, my name is Kevin and welcome to my channel where we learn how to make the web and how to make it look good while we're at it with weekly tips, tricks, and tutorials. And in this week's video, we're looking at how to make this cool looking card. I think it looks pretty good. We're going to be exploring responsiveness a little bit with it as well. We're going to be looking at the basics of flexbox, how we can get the two columns to work, how we can make sure and think about it a little bit while we're putting everything together to go from having it just stacking on top of each other to breaking into two columns. So I really do want to be exploring the thought process that I'm doing throughout it as much as possible, especially for layout purposes. But, you know, we're making something that looks like this. We might as well also look at how we can make it look good. Let's jump right into it. Alrighty, so let's get started on this card and what we want it to look like. So the first thing obviously we need is a div class of card because, you know, we need something to work inside of. And now we have two parts to this card. It's going to have a left side and a right side on it. And we want to do that. We're going to be using flexbox for this one. So we need to have two divs. Now, so I'm going to be putting a display flex on my card to create these two columns. Now at the small screen sizes, it's not actually going to be two columns. It's at small screen sizes, it is going to be one column, but I have to think this will be two when I get to a bigger size. So we have to organize our content with that in mind. So let's do that. I'm going to do a profile sidebar, and what I'm using right now is something called Emmet. If you're using VS Code like I am, it is built in. If you're using a different editor, you may have to install that yourself through an extension. So if I do .profile sidebar and I push tab on my keyboard, it does everything else for me. So it speeds me up a little bit. So that's going to be one of my columns, and the other column is going to be, we'll call it profile main. That makes sense because we have a sidebar and then the main area. Let's go into the sidebar now and we can start working around in here. We're going to need two things. We're going to need an image, and we're also going to need to have our social list, right? We need those social icons. Those social icons, I am going to be using Font Awesome. I haven't brought those in yet, so I'll have to grab that in a minute. But for that, we will need a unordered list that will have 3 list items in it. So this is Emmet here, so li times 3, and then inside of that, each one will be a link, and I'll push tab to spit everything I need out there, and we're not going to have them go anywhere for now. If you want to set those up, obviously you could. So that's the basic structure for that. I'm not going to bring all the text in my image yet. I'll do that, I'll fast forward while I do all of that, so you don't have to watch me paste in all the boring stuff. So inside my card, we have my first column done. Now we can come into my profile main, and we can start working away in here. So in my profile main, well, what do we need? We don't need as much. This one's pretty simple, I think. We have I'm going to use an H2, assuming there's an H1 somewhere else on the page, because this is just a component within, could be part of a larger page. So my H2, we'll call it profile name, like that. We're also going to have a paragraph of profile position, which is going to be like the graphic designer thing that we have on there, as well as a paragraph that we can call profile body, just the the regular paragraph text and all of that. I'm going to fast forward while I bring in this content here, just because it'd be kind of boring to watch me type that, and then I'm going to talk a little bit more about the image and these social icons in 1 second. Alright, so there we go. I've brought the image in, but I just do want to mention it. This is a placeholder service, so every time the page loads, it's possible another picture, or actually I guarantee it, a different picture will come in. So it's a placeholder service called Pravatar. You can check it out, pravatar.cc, and whatever the size you put here is how big your image will be. The maximum is 1000. But I'm going to stick with 125 for now because that's roughly the size that I want to be using. So for something like this, a quick demo or something where you don't have your picture ready yet, it can be really, really handy. Obviously, you wouldn't want to use this in production. For these links here, what I'm going to do, I'm going to be going and using the CDN here from Font Awesome, for Font Awesome from CDN.js, which is just a place that links like thousands of libraries, so you can use them really nicely and easily and quickly. So I'm just going to set that up using that. But if you wanted to do it for your own project, I'd probably set it up with the actual Font Awesome stuff, because here if you go start for free, they'll ask you for your email, they'll send you a custom link. You can sort of set things up specifically for your projects and stuff. So but for a quick demonstration like this one, I think the easiest thing is to use there we go, just to bring in the one from CDN.js so I can actually use them. And now I want to use those Font Awesome icons. Luckily, that's super easy to do. You go to Font Awesome on their icons page, and you can just grab the icon that you want. There's like a big I want to start using this icon picture. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to click here, So it copies that, and then you can paste that in and you hit save, and it's going to work right there. So that's really, really nice. And in this case, I want the dribble square, not an address book. So I need to change this, and you can get all of these right from dribble square from there. The easiest thing to do is get it from their page instead of trying to remember exactly what to set up there. So that is the little dribble icon coming in. I'm going to set the next two up in really quickly. Then we'll jump into our CSS. Now you might have noticed things are set up a little bit. So if we jump over to my CSS file here, I have switched my box sizing over to border box because that just makes life easier. And I set up my font family and I put a min height, and this display grid and place item center just keeps everything right in the middle of the screen. So that just makes our life a little bit easier. And for a single item like that, putting it in the middle of the screen can look kind of nice. So the first thing I'm gonna do is put a box shadow on here just so we can see it a little bit. I want it to be pretty subtle, so I'm gonna go with like a 0.2. And there we go, we can start seeing it just a little bit. I'm going to give it a width of 80%, but I'm also going to give it a max width of, we'll try 600 pixels, and we'll play around with it a little bit, but I don't want to get much bigger than that. I think once we break into our 2 columns. Now, as I said, we want to break this up into 2 columns when we're at our big screens. So I'm going to do a display of flex on here. So that will break it over to 2. Now that's all fine and dandy, and at big screens we're going to want it to be like that, but when we get to our small screens we want it not to look like that. So I'm going to do an inspect on here. I'm going to leave this off screen just so it doesn't take up any room, but I am going to use that to turn on. If you're in Firefox, it's on this side. If you're in Chrome, it's over on this side. There's a little phone icon, and you get, now we can control the size a little bit better. So we'll drop it down to a small screen size, and we want to play with it. So we're going to start mobile first. So I am going to do it display flex like that, and then I'm going to do my flex direction is column to switch the main axis. So now we're working up and down. Now it seems like a lot of work to go back almost to what we had, but I think it's an important step to do because we're going to be able to use and take advantage of the fact that we have a flex on this if we need to. I'm going to bring in that background color, so it's the blue just like that one, and for now I'm going to switch the color over to white and just the pure white, but we're going to have to overwrite that, but it's going to make it easier to see everything that we need to see for now. And on the mobile text align, we will do a center on there to keep everything centered like that. And the last thing I want to do is I don't want anything ever touching the sides, so let's bring a little touch of padding on there. We'll go with a 2M, which should just give us a nice little bit of spacing around the sides. There's going to be a bit more on the bottom, and well, just on the bottom because our paragraph also here has some margin on it, but we'll get rid of that a little bit later. Before I really start worrying about the layout, I do like fixing the typography, but I think the very first thing that's driving me nuts right now are these icons. So let's do that. Now, one thing I didn't do when I set this up actually is I didn't give anything here a class. So I think I'm going to give this UL a class of social list. And let's come on all of these. So I'm going to command click or control click and go down like that. And then on here, so we're doing all 3 at once, we can give these the class is equal to, and I'll call it a social item. And then we can come on each individual link as well. And we can give each one of those a class of social link. We could also call that social icon, I guess, as well, but I'm used to doing my lists this way, so I'm going to stick with that. So it just makes it so much easier when you do this to know what your CSS is actually doing. So I'm not just targeting like this generic list. What list is it? My social list, super clear. So if somebody looks at this CSS right away, they know exactly what we're doing. We want it to be in columns, so right away a display of flex would put that into columns. And of course we want those bullet points to disappear, so we'll do a list style of none. I'm also going to do a margin of 0 and padding of 0. Now I might come back and change this margin away from 0, but I like resetting it all just so the weird spacing and stuff doesn't get in the way. We want everything here to be centered, and when I have the padding set to, if I don't have it set to 0, there's padding on the left side of a list. So turning that off just lets me have full control over exactly what it is, and it won't offset everything by that padding amount. So there are a few different ways that we could center these items. I could do a justify content center, which would center them on the screen like that. And then I could add margin to the individual pieces. But since we're using, as much as possible, I'm going to stick with just doing it on my social list. So what I'm going to do is actually give this a width. Let's start with just like a width of 150 pixels, and we'll see from there. And I'm going to give it a border so we can actually see what this is going to do. of, let's do 3 pixels solid, and we'll do red because I think we'll be able to see it pretty clearly. So there we go. So we can see that we've put this box around my list. Now we can do a margin 0 auto on that to center it. There we go. And now what I can do is, because I've limited the width of the space that I'm using for these icons, I can also do my justify content, but do a either space between or space around. I think it's one of the few times I'll use space around, and it will spread my icons out. If I used a space between, it would space them out a little bit more. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter for something like this, but if you want to make sure that you're stuck to the sides, space between is the one you want to use. So obviously we don't need my border, and I'm actually going to make this a little bit smaller just based on the size of my image that I have, and I think that's going to look a little bit better. I might even shrink that a bit more later, we'll see. So those are okay, but obviously the color and the size of them are wrong, so let's come on to my social link itself. So on my social link, the color of it's obviously way off. So for this one, I have a color that I want to be using, so I'll bring that color in right away, but I find them really, really bright. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to lower their opacity down to, like, I don't know, 0.5 or something, get them to blend into the design a little bit more. So that looks nice, but then we can have my social link hover and social link focus both go out to be opacity of 1. So when we hover on top, we get that nice bright color comes back in, or if we're tabbing through, we get the nice bright color that comes through, but the rest of the time it just sort of blends into the design a little bit more. And it's working. They're really hard to see the icons though, so I am going to boost the font size a little bit, especially that dribble one is like really hard to see. It's not going to be a big size difference, but just a little scooch there, I think makes it a little bit more clear what each one is. And again, this one's really not super easy to read, but we'll stick with it. And now that I'm looking at those, I did forget one thing. I'm going to come back to here, and if we have links like this that don't have any text in them, a screen reader literally has no idea what it's for. So we could use an area label on these just to replace what the text is. So we could have dribble like that, and Twitter. So it's always a good idea to do this if your link is an image or if your link is an icon like these ones, to include your area label, just so if there is a screen reader, it knows what it actually is. Like, why would I click on this instead of just having literally no idea what the link is doing or where it might go to. Normally I would go through all my typography, but since we're focused on this top section here, I am going to just do the image right away. So I don't think I gave this a class either. I wasn't very good at setting that up. So class is equal to profile image. It's probably the easiest name to remember. And so here we can have my profile image, and well, the first thing that's quite clear is border radius of 50%. Because it's a perfect square, it will turn it into a perfect circle, and I gotta save both files when you make a change. And there we go. So there is our new picture that is a nice perfect circle. I will add a border to that. The original border I don't think was quite big enough, so I'm going to try a little bit bigger. 5 pixels solid white. We'll see what that looks like. I think that's a little bit better, maybe like a 4. I think something like that. I don't want it to be too strong. Maybe we could have it as a lighter color. But yeah, I think I'm going to stick with that for now. And now we can get into down here. So for that one, I'm going to come up to here actually and do it, just because it's my main content. So we had my profile name. So the font size on this one, obviously a lot bigger. We're going to go with a 2 rem on that. You can see when it is on 2 lines, it doesn't look good. So my line height can be probably a 1. When you get to bigger font sizes, you can really reduce that, maybe a 1.1, but it's working out pretty well with this name. A little worried if it was a different name that the Y and the H there might be touching. So I think I'll boost that up to like a 1.1 just to give it a little bit more space. And with these really bold font, this is like a super bold or black font, the letters are super close together. It is a big size, but I think I'm also going to give it a little bit of letter spacing just to help make it a touch more readable. We're probably eventually going to want to play with our margins, but for now I think it looks okay. What we want though is to add that line that's going to go underneath it. So if I come here and I do my profile name after, we can add in our pseudo element. So the pseudo element, if you don't know them, I have many videos on them, so you can check those out. There should be a card coming up for it now, but we need to have some content on there, and either a position, or in this case, I'm just going to use a nice little display block. It's going to get a height of 1 pixel, It's usually what I give it. And a width, I don't know. I'll start with I'll try 2M. You could do a pixel value for something like this and obviously be okay. And we need to see it. So let's give it a background color. I'm going to give it this same background color that I used here. And once again, we'll just drop the opacity on that so it doesn't stand out too much. But let's see if we can actually get it showing up on our page. And you know what I did? I was just looking at why can't I see it anywhere? I chose the wrong blue there. I wanted to take the blue that I used here instead. If you blue on blue, you're not going to see it, right? There we go. That looks a little bit better. We want it to be in the middle. It's display block. So if it's display block, a nice little margin 0 auto will go right in the middle like that. But I do want some spacing on the top and the bottom of it. So instead of a 0, let's try 0.5M and see where we go from there. Nice. That's looking good, but see how the space on top actually looks different from the space on the bottom? Part of that's coming down to the spacing on here, which we could deal with right away. So that would be my profile position. I think we want to keep a margin bottom, but for now I'm going to put margin 0, and we can always fix that after. And that didn't actually change anything like I thought it would. So the spacing isn't coming from this, it's actually coming from that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep the bottom margin at 0.5, but I'm going to increase the top margin and try and balance it out a little bit. And I think that looks much more centered, so we're going to stick with that. I'm happy with that. We have a little bit more work to do. So on my profile position here, we want it to be all caps, so we can do a text transform on that, uppercase. I'm actually going to shrink the font size on this just a touch. Font size, let's try like a 0.875 rem. And letter spacing, which I don't usually go too crazy on, but I am going to give it quite a bit here. And 3 pixels is a lot when it comes to letter spacing. You can see that really does a nice job spacing it all out. And the color, we want to switch it over once again to this nice color that we have right there. In this case, I'm not going to lower the opacity. I think that looks just good there. And what I am going to do, though, is I find they're a bit too similar, and I'd rather people focus on this than the line in between them. So up over on my pseudo element, let's lower the opacity on that one, maybe to a 0.25 or something. We can lower it probably quite a bit. We'll try a 3.5. I want it to be pretty low and not stand out too much, but it should be visible, but it's really a decoration. And that's what pseudo elements should be, right? They don't have content, they're usually decorations. So it's just this little decorative element that I don't want it to be really in your face or anything like that. It's just sort of an extra detail that is in there. So pretty happy with what that's coming together. The last thing I'm going to do is come on to this, which is my profile body. And what do we want to do on there? I think the only thing I'm going to do is give the font weight. I had a 300 loaded in just to lighten it up a little bit. And we can drop the opacity on this one a little bit as well. That's working. Maybe it's a little bit, let's try 0.8 maybe. And I just want to make it so it's not as super in your face. It's a light font. I think we're really pushing the limits of the contrast ratios and stuff. But overall, I am pretty happy with that. I'm just going to do a margin bottom of 0 to get rid of that extra space. And with the space, I'm going to add a little bit right here of margin bottom. We'll bring it up to like a 2M just to increase the space on that a little bit. And there we go. I'm super duper happy with that at the small screens, but now we need this to work on big screens as well, because at one point it's not going to look so great. Let's give it a bit more room here. Because at one point, when we get to here, it still sort of works, but it's not looking fantastic. So let's come all the way down and make a media query. So at media, I'm going to go inside my parens here and do a min width of, I'm going to do like 450 pixels. A bit arbitrary at the moment. I'm just thinking, actually 450 might be a bit narrow. Let's do like 600. So it's right around here. So I'm really just seeing where we are here. I think it's really good at the narrow screens, but when we get to about 600, which is here, is when, it's starting to get a little bit wide. The spacing at the top, I'm not such a big fan of now. It looks a little bit bottom heavy. So that I think would be a nice place for my card to switch its flex direction. So my flex direction can go back to being a row. And that means the children become columns. So when we... Oh, and of course you need your pixels up here. 600, what? We want There we go. So that's working. So when we get to that 600, the spacing gets a bit awkward. Boom, it falls down and looks something like that, which looks a lot nicer. I'm pretty happy with that falling down and looking like that. Now there is some fixing up to do though, because it is far from perfect. So if you remember, we had my profile sidebar and profile main. So I'm going to grab my profile main and do a text align of left on that one to pump that over to the side. Now, obviously we don't want these things touching because that looks really, really bad. So since we're already on my profile, I could either go on my profile sidebar and add the space there, but since we're already here, I'll just add a margin left of 2em to give me the space I need. Super. So that looks a little bit better. And the biggest problem right now is this is stuck off over there. So that was my profile name after. And the easy solution for that is, if you remember how we got it to go in the middle, was by doing a margin 0 auto. So it is sitting around in the middle like we do with block level elements all the time. So I'm just going to say that my margin left is 0 now. And look at that. It is looking nice and dandy. I'm actually really happy with that. It works at small screens. It's working here. When we come to that size, it's working. And everything is super duper. And I think it looks really, really nice. Now, one thing just before we go, as a quick reminder, and it's why I set things up from the very beginning, because even though a lot of the work we did was at this stage, when we wanted to get our 2 columns here, I really had to set it up here with this with the profile sidebar and my profile main here, because when I do display flex on this, it's making this one column, which is right here, and then it's making this my other column, which is right there. So just planning ahead, because sometimes you look at the mobile design, you don't realize that you need to break those off into different pieces, and then it sort of bites you in the butt. So just remember to plan these things ahead when you're getting them ready, and don't just focus on one screen at a time. So I hope you learned a couple things along the way, and I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did learn anything, leave a comment down below and let me know what it was. I'd love knowing what you guys are learning. If you're new here and you haven't yet subscribed, please consider subscribing. It's videos just like this one every single week. And one thing I just want to let you guys know before I let you go is this is the type of thing that I've put into my new course, the Responsive Web Design Bootcamp, where we're looking at how to build responsive websites and how to think responsively. We're building out cards like this one, but we also build out 2 3-page websites. We're exploring the fundamentals of CSS all the way up into deep dives into grid and CSS grid. And then we're building stuff throughout, and we're also doing it all on Scrimba. If you don't know about Scrimba, it's this amazing platform. Like, go and check the link I have down below just to see what Scrimba is all about, because when you were watching me do all that stuff, wouldn't it have been cool if you could pause and edit the code that I had already did just to see a couple little changes? You can do that in Scrimba. You literally, in the video player itself, you're editing the code. It's really, really cool and fun. So throughout, I'm offering you challenges where before I do something, I try and get you to do it, and then you can compare how you did it to how I end up doing it, because when you hit play, it just resumes the lesson right from there. The course itself has over 170 lessons in it. It's more than 15 hours of content, and for the next 2 days, it is on sale for $29. After that, it goes up to its full price of $99, so get it before August the 30th. After that, the sale is over. If you're watching this after the fact, I'm sorry. But yes, the course is still going to be there. It's still going to be open, but we'll be going up to the full price. If you have any questions about the course, there's a link that has more information about it down below, or of course you can just leave a comment and let me know about it. Thank you very much for watching. Once again, I really hope you learned 1 or 2 things along the way. I hope you enjoyed the video, and big, huge, massive thank you to my patrons for helping support me and everything I do here on my channel. I really appreciate your guys' support. Without it, I would not be able to keep doing what I do here, so thank you very, very much. And of course, until next time, don't forget to make your corner of the internet just a little bit more awesome.